All right. So I want to talk, first of all, just about the scales. Because a lot of times as players, we're like, oh, scale. Why in the world do I have to play a scale? We don't practice it a lot, we kind of overlook it. We don't think it's very important. But that's really a place where we can show off. I mean, I know that solos are more fun and excerpts are what we're planning for. But like I said in the other session in there, scale is a great way to get your footing in an audition. If you're really nervous, go slow, take your time, spend some time in the range where you feel most comfortable. So if you love playing low and you feel like you sound good playing low, start on a lower scale and give yourself time, play half notes. If they'll allow you to do that. Sometimes they don't, but just take your time and think about your air, think about your tone, so that when you do get to the more difficult stuff, you've got things working properly. And that leads us to the next step, which string players don't understand this, because they don't deal with wind. They don't deal with the body the way brass and woodwind players deal with the body. We have to have air. And when you practice and prepare for an audition, you have got to think about your breathing a lot and prepare for having less air, if that makes sense. Because when you get in an audition and you get nervous, one of the first things that happens is your breath support goes away. You take shallow breaths, and then you don't have enough air to make it to the end of phrases. So I haven't done this enough in my own career, but I know that it's necessary. You got to change your breathing, maybe move it up a little bit, give yourself more air over the course of the phrase so that you can make it to the end. Because you don't want to peter out at the end of the phrase, you don't want to go out of tune at the end of the phrase because you're out of air. So prepare that way. Also, another thing that I have done a lot of in my career in preparation for auditions is when you breathe, mentally focus on being relaxed in your breath. Because if you can breathe in relaxed, you have a much better chance of playing relaxed. And that's something we don't think a lot about. But I'll tell you, the respiratory stuff when we get an audition, that can kill us. So depending on the state of your nerves, you really want to think about my air and how am I going to use my air properly in an audition, because it does. It a lot of times makes or breaks things. Okay. So really think about the scales. Focus on your scales when you're practicing. And then the last thing I want to talk about, excerpts. If they give you an excerpt ahead of time, it needs to be pretty much perfect. Okay? Because oftentimes in auditions they don't give it to you ahead of time. You have to go in and sight read it. And I've had some pretty miserable experiences with sight reading excerpts. I'll never forget the first major symphony that I auditioned for. They stuck some weird piece in front of me that it wasn't even tonal. I mean, and the notes were just random all over the place. And I muddied through that for 2 minutes, and it was the worst experience of my life. But there's no way you can prepare for that. You can't prepare for that, because they're, especially when they pull some random thing out like that. It's just a matter of working on your sight reading skills, playing a lot, and praying, I guess. I don't know. But, so last thing, your solo. I would say, as you go into an audition, think about who are you auditioning for, if you know. Okay? So let's talk about this audition. The main person in charge, Mr. Dunn, is a string player. He doesn't know a lot about trumpet, especially this kind of stuff. Okay? He knows what he wants to hear as far as quality of sound, but as far as technique, he doesn't understand that too well because he's never done it. Okay? So when you're auditioning for somebody like that, you want to choose music that is primarily going to show off your tone, but gives you the best chance to perform well. So don't get something too stinking hard, okay? Really, there is no literature in symphony music that is extremely hard. There's high stuff, there's low stuff, there is stuff that's got some tricky rhythms and articulation, but there's nothing really that hard. So choose something that you can excel at, that you can play really, really well, even in a nervous state, okay? And keep in mind that it's a string player you're auditioning for, so just about anything you choose, they probably haven't heard before. I mean, yeah, there's some standard literature for brass instruments, but they might have heard the melody here and there, but they're probably not going to know the innards of that music. So don't worry about making mistakes. Just do your best. Really focus on articulation, because if I am in an audition, if I'm doing an audition, I don't care so much about wrong notes, about a cracked note. I want to hear good, clean articulation. I want to hear a nice round tone. And I want to hear if you have range. Those are the three things that I'm really listening for. Because I can teach you the rhythms and I can teach you the notes if you can play them. I can't teach you the tongue. And I can't teach you tone in the amount of time we have. So those are the things that you've got to make sure that you show off with, is your tone and your articulation. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So we can turn that off now.
Bye.